The envelope was unsealed, white, a little crumpled at the edges. My name was written on it in blocky, angry handwriting that I instantly recognized as Hallie's. It was taped to my shaving mirror. That alone should have told me something was off. Neither of my daughters had spoken to me with any emotion stronger than indifference for the past 6 months. But now, suddenly, I was important enough for a note. I peeled it off, expecting teenage sarcasm. Maybe another list of things I'd supposedly ruined. Instead, I unfolded 2 sheets. The first was a printed email. The second, a paternity test. My eyes didn't even finish scanning the header before the tremor in my hand started. The test was real. It had the same lab we'd used years ago when my cousin's kid needed genetic verification for surgery. The name fields were filled in. Father, Lowell C. Danner. Child, Hallie J. Danner. Result, probability of paternity, 0%. The room spun. I dropped the paper onto the bathroom counter and just stared at my reflection. I don't know how long I stood there. The mirror fogged, then cleared, then fogged again. I was blinking, but nothing was changing. A line from the email jumped out at me. We deserve to know the truth. Stop lying to us. And underneath that, in handwriting, Brenna's this time, were 5 words I'll never erase from my mind. You were just a placeholder. Not we're sorry. Not can we talk. Just that. Just a placeholder. That was a Tuesday. I remember it because I skipped work for the first time in 17 years. I didn't call in. I just stayed in the garage, sitting in the passenger seat of my own car. I didn't even turn on the ignition. I wasn't thinking of anything dramatic. I wasn't angry or plotting revenge or anything stupid like that. I was just cold. There's this thing no one tells you about being a dad, that sometimes the job doesn't end in some tragic car crash or long hospital goodbye. Sometimes it ends because 2 people you raised decide to hand you paperwork and say, you don't count anymore. It wasn't even about genetics. It was about being erased. When Nadine got home that night, I didn't say a word. I just placed the envelope in front of her dinner plate. She barely looked surprised, just annoyed. Hallie said you might act like this, she muttered. She's angry, Lowell. They both are. I asked one question. Who is he? She stared down at her food. It doesn't matter. That was the exact second something inside me cracked. Not a loud snap. No dramatic breakdown. Just quiet collapse. For 2 decades, I had shaped my life around 3 people. Every choice, every compromise, every gray hair was because of them. And in return, I was a background character, an actor with the wrong lines. But if they truly believed I wasn't their father, then maybe I needed to stop pretending I still was. So that night, I made a plan. And it started with silence. Not rage. Not confrontation. Just the one thing none of them ever expected from me. Withdrawal. But what came after that? They didn't see it coming. Not even close. I didn't say a word for the next 3 days. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I had nothing left to say. What do you tell people who strip your identity from you like a name tag and then hand it back, wrinkled and useless? On the surface, everything stayed the same. I woke up, made coffee, drove to work, picked up groceries, answered emails. But something subtle had shifted in the house. Like the walls were listening now. Or maybe they always had been. Nadine started sleeping with her phone face down again. She turned it over the moment I walked in her room. She'd done that before, years ago, but back then I still trusted her. This time, I just noticed it and filed it away in the same mental box as the missing paternity. Hallie and Brenna mostly stayed out of sight. Brenna didn't even acknowledge me when I passed her in the hallway. Hallie at least offered a nod, but it felt performative, like she was checking off a box. Neither of them apologized. Neither of them tried to talk. They were simply done with me. And honestly, I think that's what cut the deepest. Not the betrayal. Not even the lie. It was the ease of their detachment. On Friday evening, I came home and found them in the living room, sitting side by side, scrolling through something on a laptop. Nadine stood behind them, arms folded, like she was managing a presentation. There were suitcases by the front door. I already knew what was coming. We're staying at Aunt Valerie's for a while, Hallie said. Her tone was light, not angry, almost relieved. Brenna chimed in, we just need some space. Nadine didn't say a word. She just looked at me like this was overdue, like I should thank them for finally doing what I couldn't. I nodded. I didn't ask why. Didn't try to stop them. Hallie picked up her bag. It's probably for the best. Then she said something I still hear when I close my eyes. We're finally free now. Free? From what? From me? I almost laughed. Not out of humor, but in that hollow, stunned way people laugh at funerals when someone says something so jarringly inappropriate that all you can do is exhale disbelief. They left without a goodbye. The door didn't slam. It clicked softly. That night, I wandered into the attic, a place I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just needed to feel the dust, the silence, the things we packed away and forgot. And there, wedged behind an old crib, I found a cardboard box labeled Girls' Stuff. Inside were old drawings, birthday cards, report cards. And near the bottom, an envelope I didn't recognize. It was addressed to Nadine. The postmark was from 2006. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from a man named Micah, the same name that had appeared in a comment on Nadine's Instagram a year ago, a comment I thought nothing of at the time. I miss what we had. I know we made mistakes, but sometimes I wonder what our girls would have looked like. Our girls. The air left my lungs. I reread the sentence 3 times, praying I was misunderstanding it. But it was all there, right in front of me. This wasn't some fling. This wasn't some foggy night accident. This was a choice. A secret Nadine carried every day while smiling across the dinner table at me. She had kept this man tethered to her through social media, through memories, through lies. And the worst part? He knew. He knew about the girls. About me. He even referenced me in a footnote at the bottom of the letter. If he ever finds out, I'm sorry. But I never stopped thinking of them as mine. So he had claimed them. Nadine had accepted that claim. And now my daughters, who I had raised with every fiber of my being, had internalized it. I wasn't their father. Not in biology. Not in their eyes. I was just the guy who bought the groceries. I sat in the attic for an hour, surrounded by the ghosts of memories I once believed were mine. Birthday candles I'd lit. Shoes I tied. Tears I'd wiped. And it all meant nothing to them. But here's the thing about being quietly erased. You start looking at your life not as something tragic, but as something recyclable. If I wasn't their father, if I wasn't her husband, then who the hell was I? Maybe it was time to find out. Not by leaving, but by letting them see what absence really looked like. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I didn't burn anything or write some goodbye letter in thick black Sharpie. No, I did something much quieter. Something worse, honestly. I stayed, but I erased myself from their lives. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than I ever had before. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I needed the silence. I stood in the hallway, just outside their empty bedrooms. Hallie's door was cracked open, revealing the messy nest of a teenager who'd moved out without bothering to make her bed. Brenna's room smelled faintly like the vanilla lotion she always used. Their absence didn't feel like peace. It felt like a held breath that no one was willing to exhale. I went downstairs and took out every photo frame in the living room. Not to break them, not to make a scene. I just turned each one around so they faced the wall. It was symbolic, I guess. Their version of the truth had already made me invisible. I was just catching up. Then I did something that might seem small, but it felt seismic. I changed my contact name in Nadine's phone. I'd done it once years ago during a prank phase where I changed it to the Boss Man briefcase. She'd laughed. We were still in love back then, or so I thought. But this time, I picked something else entirely. Nobody. Then I left the phone exactly where it was, on the charger in the kitchen, next to her favorite coffee mug. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror, just reflecting back what I'd become in this house. She came home around noon, alone. Her hair was pulled back like she'd been crying in the car. I was in the garage, fixing the shelf I had been meaning to tighten for over a year. She walked past me without saying a word, just a flicker of hesitation at the door. The next day, she brought it up. You turned all the pictures around. I didn't look up. They were facing the wrong way. She sighed like she was too tired for metaphor. Lowell, they're just kids. They're figuring things out. Were you figuring things out when you let someone else be their father behind my back? I asked without raising my voice. She didn't respond. I found Micah's letter. I added, "You kept it." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't deny it. Why him? I asked. What did he have that I didn't? Nadine looked at me. Not with guilt, not with anger. Just exhaustion. It wasn't about him. It was about not feeling trapped. I was 24, married, pregnant, scared. He made me feel like I still had choices. And I didn't. You did. You chose yes. She said like I should be proud. Like being the guy who chose them made me noble instead of disposable. Later that night, I found an old hard drive in my desk. It had every home video we ever made. Birthday parties, dance recitals, vacations to Myrtle Beach in Vermont. I watched one of them, just one, where Hallie ran to me after scoring a goal at her soccer game and screamed, "Did you see that, Daddy?" I had screamed back, "That's my girl." But I guess she never was. I unplugged the hard drive and placed it in the donation box I was putting together for Goodwill. Not because I didn't want the memories, but because they didn't belong to me anymore. I've been acting in someone else's movie for 20 years, and now the credits had rolled. Only they never let me leave the set. That night, Nadine knocked on the guest room door. The room I'd moved into 2 weeks earlier, even before the truth came out. I didn't answer. She opened the door anyway. "I think we should talk," she said. "I don't," I replied. "You're still their father," she said. "Maybe not in blood, but—" I cut her off. "You don't get to decide that now." She nodded, but I saw something flicker across her face. Not sadness, not regret, fear. It was the first time I realized that maybe I wasn't the only one who was lost now. Nadine had played her role so well, for so long, that she believed it would never collapse. But now it was, and she had no idea what to do without a script. That was the night I finally wrote my own. The next morning, I made a list. Not of revenge, or legal threats, or custody battles. Just a list of what was mine. My tools, my old records, my car, my savings, my identity. And I started separating them from them, piece by piece, quietly, without warning. They thought they'd push me out of their lives. But what they didn't realize is that I was finally pushing back, not with rage, not with drama, but by becoming a man they could no longer access. And the more they started noticing, the more panic set in. Because even if I was just a placeholder to them, I had been the one holding the whole thing together. I had always been the one to fill the silences. I was the first to say, "Good morning," even when no one replied. I texted reminders about doctor appointments, birthdays, oil changes. I left post-its on the fridge saying, "Took the trash out. Love you." I carried the conversation, the warmth, the glue. But when I stopped talking, things around the house started falling apart faster than I expected. Nadine kept waiting for the ice to break. She wasn't used to quiet, at least not mine. She tried neutral conversation starters. "Did you see the water bill? The neighbor's dog got out again." Or, "You wanted to pick up dinner tonight?" I didn't ignore her. I just gave her one-word answers. Detached. Flat. Because that's all I was now, detached. And then the text started. At first, from Nadine. "Nadine, Hallie wants to come by and pick up some things." Me, "Fine." "Nadine, can we talk after work?" Me, "No." Then from Hallie herself. "Hallie, I know you're mad." Me, "No." "Hallie, it wasn't supposed to come out like that." Me, "You said what you meant." She didn't reply after that. The next weekend, they came over while I was in the garage. I heard their voices inside. At one point, I peeked through the side window and saw Hallie standing in front of the blank wall where our family photos used to hang. She stared at it for a while, almost confused. I didn't go inside until they were gone. Later that night, Nadine asked me what I wanted. "Want?" I repeated, like it was a foreign concept. "Yes, Lowell. You keep walking around like a ghost. I don't know what you're trying to do." I looked at her and said it calmly. "I want to see what life looks like when I stop being what you needed me to be." She blinked, caught off guard. "So what, you're just done?" "I don't know. Maybe I've been done for longer than I realized." She started pacing. Her voice cracked, not from sadness, but from loss of control. "This is insane. You can't just opt out." "Didn't you?" The look on her face told me she didn't expect that. She had built a reality where her betrayals were small, forgivable, even justifiable. But now that I was mirroring her detachment, it was unacceptable. Then she hit me with it. "Micah died last year." I stared at her. She looked at the floor. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I found out through a friend." I didn't tell the girls. I had no idea why she was telling me this. Until she added, "That's when things changed for me. That's when I started thinking about telling you. About everything. So, Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You waited to come clean until the only person who could hold you accountable was dead? Her silence confirmed it. And there it was, the final crack in the mask. Nadine wasn't guilty. She wasn't even confused. She was cornered. Not by me, by the life she'd lied her way into and the growing awareness that I wasn't going to help hold it up anymore. That night, I went online and searched for lawyers. Not because I wanted a divorce, because I wanted to know what I had a right to walk away with cleanly. If I was going to be erased, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I was going to take back the parts of me they never truly appreciated. The next week, I began transferring utilities, closing joint accounts, backing up files. I even removed myself from the family Spotify plan. Yes, it was petty, but it felt necessary. The silence wasn't working anymore. They needed to feel the vacuum of everything I had maintained, paid for, remembered, carried. That's when the doorbell rang one night. It was Brenna. Her eyes were red. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice trembling. I said nothing, just stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the kitchen, nervously twisting the strap of her backpack. "I didn't mean it," she said. "Mean what?" "What I wrote on the letter. About you being a placeholder. You wrote it." I was angry. "You believed it." Tears started to form in her eyes. "You were my dad. You always were." I stared at her for a long time, then asked, "Why didn't you say that when your sister looked me in the face and said I wasn't?" She couldn't answer. And for the first time since this all started, I realized something truly painful. They were more afraid of each other's judgment than they were of losing me. That's what made it easy to discard me. That's what made it easy to rewrite the story. Because standing up for me would have made them vulnerable. So they chose each other, and I finally stopped choosing them. By the end of that week, I had made peace with something I thought would destroy me. The realization that love, when ignored long enough, doesn't just fade, it curdles. The day started like any other. Rain drizzled quietly against the living room window, and the gray light outside made everything inside look colder than it actually was. I sat in my office, sipping bitter coffee and sorting through old folders, trying to decide what was mine and what wasn't worth fighting for anymore. That's when I found the file labeled drafts. Inside was a series of unsent letters I'd written over the years. Most of them I barely remembered. Apologies I never delivered, love notes that felt too vulnerable. Even one furious rant from the night I discovered Nadine had withdrawn 10 grand without telling me. I never printed that one. But one letter stood out. It was dated August 17th, 2016, Hallie's 16th birthday. I'd written it during a terrible bout of insomnia after a fight Nadine, and I had over her friend's only trip to New York, which I later suspected was really a weekend with Micah. The letter was never intended to be seen. It was raw, painful, honest, a kind of emotional time capsule. If you're reading this, it means I never sent it, which would make sense because I'm a coward when it comes to confrontation. I've spent years trying to be the man everyone else needs instead of the man I am. If I could speak freely, I'd say this. I think I'm being lied to. I think there's someone else. And I think, God help me, I've known it for a while. But I've been too scared to look under the floorboards because I'm afraid of what I'll find. So instead, I convince myself that the truth isn't worth knowing. That love is about enduring, not understanding. But the truth is, I feel invisible, used. And maybe the cruelest part is, no one seems to notice I'm still here. I reread it 3 times, stunned by how far back the erosion went. Then I made a mistake. I printed it. I didn't mean to leave it out. I swear I didn't. But when I walked out of the office to take a call, I left it on the desk, unfolded, right under the window, where anyone standing on the porch could see inside. Nadine came by that afternoon to pick up some documents for Brenna's college application. She used her old key. I didn't even know she was there until I heard the door close softly. She didn't call out, didn't knock on my office door. She just left, silently. Later that night, I found the letter moved from my desk, folded carefully, like it had been handled and considered. I knew immediately she had read it. And for the first time in weeks, she texted me first. "Nadine, I never knew you felt like that." I stared at her message. Not "I'm sorry." Not "let's talk." Just I didn't know. I didn't reply. Because if she didn't know, it's because she never wanted to. The next day, It was Brenna who showed up again. This time with Hallie. I didn't open the door. I just watched through the peephole as they stood there, unsure of whether to knock. Eventually, Hallie slipped something into the mailbox and walked away. I waited until the porch was empty before opening it. It was a photo, one I hadn't seen in years. Me, sitting on the couch, holding both of them in my arms after they'd fallen asleep during a Disney movie. I remember that night clearly. We'd built a pillow fort, and they begged me to watch Tangled with them, even though I'd seen it 15 times. Nadine must have taken a picture. On the back, in Hallie's handwriting, were 5 words. "You were always our dad." I sat with that photo for a long time. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to make the ache stop. But all I could think was, then why didn't you say that when I needed to hear it? That's the thing about truth. Timing matters. And sometimes, even the sincerest apology arrives years too late. The letter I'd never sent was supposed to stay buried. But now it had become something else, a mirror they couldn't look away from. And I realized something terrifying. They wanted me back, but not because they finally understood, because they were afraid of who they might become without me. And I wasn't sure if I could be that man for them anymore, or if I even wanted to. The next weekend I visited the storage unit, not to retrieve anything important, but because I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't echo with voices that once called me Dad like it meant something, somewhere my past couldn't find me. The place was musty, filled with old furniture we never got around to selling. Our wedding gifts. The antique dresser Nadine swore she'd refinish. The broken rocking chair that used to sit beside Brenna's crib. I wasn't digging for skeletons. I just wanted to sit on the concrete floor for a while and exist outside the collapsing timeline of our lives. That's when I found the box. It wasn't mine, or at least I didn't remember packing it. Labeled only in permanent marker, J, do not open. I opened it, and inside was a red journal. Not mine, not Nadine's, but I knew the handwriting from the first page, Hallie's. My heart dropped. At first, I thought maybe it was just old school notes, maybe a diary from middle school filled with crushes and doodles. I almost put it back, but something told me not to. I flipped to the middle, and what I saw stopped me cold. I wish I didn't know. I wish I had never looked it up. I wish Mom never told me, because now I see his face and I feel like I'm lying too. I used to think Dad would always be there, but now that I know he's not really my dad, it feels fake, like I'm pretending. And I hate pretending. It wasn't hate. It wasn't rejection. It was guilt. I turned the pages. Some were messy, written with smudged pen or angry strokes. Some were confessions. Others read like letters that would never be sent. He helped me with my science fair project until 2 a.m. I was too scared to present, and he made me laugh right before I walked on stage. I could have cried. I don't even remember if I won. Just that he waited through the whole boring thing so I'd see him clapping. I froze on that one. Because I remember that day. I remembered exactly what she wore. The green sweater she kept tugging at. The way she whispered, "I can't do it," right before stepping on stage. I had completely forgotten she ever felt that way about me. Because they made me forget. Because they rewrote the story and handed me the new script with half the pages missing. I read on. Mom told me not to tell him. She said it would destroy him. But then she told Brenna anyway. And now Brenna's acting like he's some stranger. I want to scream at her. I want to scream at myself. I hate how we're treating him. He didn't deserve this. My hands trembled. For weeks, I had lived in silence, believing I had become irrelevant. I thought I had been replaced in their hearts as easily as I'd been replaced in their bloodlines. But this wasn't that. This wasn't hatred or indifference. It was confusion. It was a daughter trying to carry a lie that was never hers to bear. And now that truth was bleeding out across lined pages, hidden in a box Nadine clearly didn't want me to see. I looked around the storage unit like someone might be watching me. Like I'd just broken into a part of my own life I wasn't supposed to touch. I didn't take the journal with me. I closed it, put it back in a box, shut the lid, and walked away. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew something had just shifted, something irreversible. Up until now, I'd assumed I was the only one drowning. But Hallie had been trying to breathe through the same flood. That night, I sat in the dark, holding the photo they'd left in the mailbox, the one of me holding them during Tangled. I hadn't cried since this all began, but I did now. Not out of grief, but out of something far stranger. Hope. And I hated that feeling, because I wasn't sure if it meant I was healing or if I was about to let them hurt me all over again. I didn't go back to the storage unit, not because I didn't want to read the rest of Hallie's journal, but because I needed time to absorb what I already had. Truth, once it's seen, has this radioactive half-life. You can't hold it too long. It changes you. I spent the next few days in what can only be described as a state of haunted clarity. Everything looked sharper. Every sound around the house felt like it echoed longer than it should have. My body was doing normal things, brushing teeth, folding laundry, answering work calls, but my mind was trapped between past and present, between being hated and being missed. And then came the voicemail. It was mid-afternoon. I had just finished a Zoom call with a vendor when I noticed the missed call on my phone. Private number. One new voicemail. I pressed play. The voice was male. Calm. Collected. Not someone I recognized right away. Lowell, it began. This is going to sound strange. I don't expect you to believe me, but I needed to clear my conscience. My name is Daniel. I used to work with your wife. I moved out of state 5 years ago. But back then, I knew what was happening. I knew about Micah, and I knew what Nadine told people behind her back. There was a long pause, like he had to force the next part out. She used to say you were weak, that you'd never leave no matter what she did. She said she respected Micah more because he was dangerous, unpredictable. She'd laugh about it. Once she told us you were like a utility bill, reliable, boring, and always paid on time. My mouth went dry. She told Hallie the truth at work one day. I was there. She cried in the break room. Nadine told her not to worry because you'd never fight back anyway, that you'd always be the safe one. And that's what you were, her safety net. The recording clicked off after that. No callback number. No explanation. I listened to it twice. Then a third time. I felt something break inside me that I didn't even know was still whole. She had poisoned me into my daughter's lives before they ever had a choice. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of character, a slow war she waged behind my back, smiling through dinners and vacations and holidays, all while discrediting me in secret. That night, I sat on the floor of the guest room and stared at the baseboard heater. I kept thinking about those words, utility bill. It wasn't the cruelty of it that hurt. It was the precision. Because she wasn't wrong. That's how I had lived. Predictable. Steady. Covering everyone's gaps while slowly fading out of focus. The perfect safety net. Until they started seeing me as the net, not the person who built it. But this voicemail had done something. It had burned away the last of the guilt. And in its place came something far more dangerous. Resolve. I knew what I had to do next. And it wasn't about confrontation or revenge. It was about finally reclaiming something for myself. I didn't tell anyone about the voicemail. Not Hallie. Not Brenna. Not even my closest friend, who had been texting every week to check in. I needed to hold this card tight to my chest because I knew instinctively what it meant. Nadine's story wasn't finished unraveling. 2 days later, I was sitting in the living room, blinds closed, lights off, just watching dust drift through the window slats when the doorbell rang. I ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. A rhythmic knock followed, quiet but insistent. I opened the door, and there she was. Nadine. She looked pale, tired. She had a manila folder in her hand, and the kind of hollow expression people get when they realize the fire they lit is now out of control. "Can I come in?" she asked. No. She didn't argue. Just opened the folder and held it out. "What is it?" I asked, not reaching for it. She exhaled slowly. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." I stared at her, waiting. Then she added, almost in a whisper, "It's from Micah." Everything inside me locked up. "Before he died," she continued, "he wrote something. For you." I kept it. I don't know why. I took the folder, closed the door without another word, and then I stood in the kitchen, holding it like a live wire. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in sharp, meticulous print. "Lowell, I imagine you hate me. Maybe more than you've ever hated anyone. You have a right to." I crossed a line. I loved a woman who wasn't mine. I told myself it was complicated, but the truth is simple. I wanted something that belonged to someone else. But the girls, they were never part of that. They never knew me. I never claimed them. I never reached out. Nadine kept that door closed, for better or worse. I respected that. But I also need you to know something. She never stopped choosing you. Not really. She just never understood how to stay. Maybe you won't believe that. Maybe you shouldn't. But the truth is uglier than betrayal. The truth is we both failed her in different ways. You by staying too long. Me by arriving too late. I'm sorry. Micah, I read it 3 times. And with every read, a different word hit me harder than the last. Because the letter wasn't an apology. It was a confession. And somewhere between his regret and her silence, I began to understand something that changed everything. This was never about biology. It was about narrative. Nadine had written the story she wanted, the lover, the guilt, the replacement, and handed it to the girls before they ever had the wisdom to ask questions. And I had let it happen. Quietly, gradually, blindly. But now I held the final pieces in my hands. And the story was about to change. I sat with Micah's letter for hours. Not out of emotion, at least not the kind that makes you sob in the corner or punch a wall. This was quieter, heavier, like something had finally gone still inside me, and I needed time to understand what that stillness meant. There was a strange comfort in his words, not forgiveness, not closure, but recognition. And maybe, in the wreckage of everything I'd lost, that's what I'd been looking for all along. Someone else, even if it was the man who helped destroy my family, finally admitted I wasn't crazy. I had been betrayed. I had been forgotten. I had been left behind. But I had mattered. And I still do. That realization changed everything. The next morning, I didn't answer calls. I didn't open texts. I didn't go to work. Instead, I took a drive out past Maple Hollow, toward the lake where we used to take the girls when they were little. It had rained the night before. Everything smelled like pine and wet earth. There's a trail that wraps around the water. I used to carry Hallie on my shoulders there, while Brenna picked wildflowers Nadine would later forget in the back seat. I walked it alone now, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost retracing someone else's memories. I felt like me. That night, I did something I hadn't done since this whole thing started. I cooked a real dinner. Not out of duty, not out of routine, but because I wanted to feel like myself again. I played my old records, poured a glass of wine, ate at the table with the lights dimmed just the way I liked. And when I finished, I sat there in the silence and smiled. Because I was alone, and it was enough. But the universe doesn't let go of people that easily. 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. Hallie. She looked older than she had a month ago, tired in a way I recognized. Hi, she said. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She didn't say anything at first. Just walked through the house, slowly touching things. The back of the couch, the photo ledge, the corner of the wall where her height marks were still faintly visible from years ago. Then she turned to me and asked something I wasn't expecting. Can I come home? I didn't answer right away. I know I hurt you, she added. I know what I said was wrong. I think I just needed someone to blame. And you were always there. So I took it out on you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw my daughter. Not by DNA, but by every scrape knee I bandaged. Every spelling test I practiced with her. Every night I sat by her bed when she had nightmares about the man in the closet. And I said, home's a place you build, not just a place you ask to return to. She nodded slowly. Then can I help rebuild it? A week later, Brenna called. Then she came by. Then Nadine. One by one, the silence cracked. Not with anger, not with demands, but with quiet, awkward, uncertain efforts. They didn't ask to erase what happened. They just asked if there was anything left to save. And I told them the truth. I wasn't their father anymore. Not the way I used to be. But I could be someone else now, someone honest. Someone boundaried. Someone who finally knew his worth. We started fresh. Not by trying to glue the old pieces back together, but by setting them down and building something different. Something smaller. Simpler. I kept the journal. The letter. The photo. Not as trophies, but as anchors, reminders of how far I drifted and how hard I fought to come back. Today, I'm in a new house. It's quiet. Peaceful. I plant herbs in the backyard. I take walks. I laugh again. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with Hallie or Brenna when they visit, and they do now. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Nadine and I speak occasionally. Cordially. And that's enough. We were not forever, but we were something once. And that deserves peace, not bitterness. This isn't the ending I imagined. It's better, because it's mine.